The tremendous offensive was bitterly contested. The Nazis knew that each passing hour diminished their chances of throwing the Allies back into the sea. But the American, British, and Canadian troops pressed forward firmly onto the soil of France.
Paratroopers receive last-minute instructions before taking off for the invasion coast 100 miles across the English Channel. These are the heroes who established first contact with the enemy.
Hello guys, Jonathan here, welcome back. Something a bit different for you this time. We're going to be looking into some of the weapons present on D-Day. We're doing that in collaboration with our friends at the Imperial War Museum, and we're going to be throwing over to them later on. So first up, the humble Sten gun, but with a bit of a twist. So the Sten had been developed as a bit of a crash, last-ditch kind of weapon with the Mark I, although it still had wooden furniture on it, more traditional, that sort of more traditional feature. But it was very cheap, steel tube, simple blowback mechanism with just a breech block with a spring behind it, picking up the rounds, slamming it into the chamber and firing it. No bells and whistles, although it did have the change lever, the selector for semi-automatic, because British doctrine said this is a machine carbine, you're supposed to fire single shots first. That then got basically cheaper and cheaper. The Mark II, the most prolific variant, no wood at all, stripped right down, no pistol grip, no real grip at the front either. You just sort of hold onto the heat shield and hope for the best. The Mark III, more of an offshoot made by a toy company, but there was a super cheap version of the Mark II where the body wasn't even a drawn tube, it was just a wrapped bit of sheet steel, and that was too cheap, and we had to dial it back from that. The other issue is quality control. You're churning these things out en masse on a production line without a skilled, well, not necessarily with a skilled workforce. They're doing their best, but some things are coming out the factory in less than ideal condition. And all of this, together with a couple of inherent design flaws that I'll come to, leads to a terrible reputation in some quarters. Some of that is because infantry are coming from beautiful blued steel and walnut Brens and Enfields. Some of it's because this isn't the best thing ever. But by 1944, the Allies are about to go back into Europe, preparing for D-Day. The Sten gets a shot in the arm, and we get this Gucci variant of the Sten, the Mark V. We can actually see on the magazine housing there, Mark V. Roman numerals still at this point. After the war it turns into Arabic numerals, so you'll see the Mark V notated as both. Much better finish overall, you can see that right away. This one I believe has been refinished post-war, but it's pretty indicative. So we've got a phosphating and then a nice hard black paint finish over the top, whereas the Stens were just phosphated and sent out the door. There's that pistol grip that I mentioned. We have a nice number 4 rifle style buttstock, complete with a butt trap for a cleaning kit. So your infantry are going to be more familiar when they come in as recruits, interchangeably between things like the rifle, the Bren and the Sten. They're not stuck with a simple skeletal or tubular metal stock. It's a lot more comfortable to get the cheek down onto for more accurate firing as well. We also get additional wooden furniture at the front. This Thompson style gangster grip, which is not on the drawing. It's not on the official drawing for the Mark V Sten, which is kind of curious. That's from late 43. But by the time these things see service in 44, it's on there. It goes away again in 45, but for D-Day, this grip is absolutely on there. Now, the photos and the footage you'll see, they're holding them like this, sort of low ready to pop up and shoot. That seems to be a hangover from the old Mark II and Mark III, where they decided this wasn't particularly conducive to great shoot. It's more to do with it being awkward to carry with the muzzle down, I think, by holding the heat shield. And the same goes for that foregrip. So they're carrying it like this, which means if they have to respond quickly to an enemy, that's how they're going to be shooting it as well. Whether from the assault position down here, we see that done, or whether they bring it up to the shoulder, to shoot more accurately. Moving forward again, we have number 4 rifle again, style front sight. A much slimmer blade than the enormous great triangular front sight of the earlier Sten. So in theory a bit more precise, but we still have a simple aperture hole at the back there. And it has a number 4 rifle style front sight protector block on it as well. So it's like they've tried to merge the two weapons in some ways. And that extends to the bayonet, which is literally a number 4 Mark II bayonet for the number 4 rifle. It works the same way. We've got a press catch, turn, and off it comes. And it's a simple steel spike, hardened. Now, the Mark II Sten had a bayonet as well. No one seems to have used it, whereas photos and footage from D-Day and onwards, we see these fitted with bayonets quite frequently. Now, is that because of going on the offensive? Possibly. Is it because the number 4 bayonet's much better than the Mark II Sten bayonet? Probably that as well. So you will see this configuration quite a bit. And we even have this sling on this example as well, which is nice. Now, although most troops heading out for D-Day would have been equipped with, if they have a Sten in the first place, so your section leaders, your specialist troops, they would have been going out with Mark II, maybe even Mark III Stens, standard stuff. But certainly the Paratroop Regiment, likely other more elite units, they were getting brand new Gucci Mark V Stens to go to war with. So we know the 6th Airborne had them, because there's a very nice picture over at the IWM archive of a load of guys holding them. And the different unit of Paras, I think, later on at Arnhem, photo there, showing the same guns. They must have dropped with those. And also, actually a colleague identified for me, thank you Matthew, B&D companies of the 2nd Battalion Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry also had Mark V Stens. So whether you're dropping with your para kit, which means buttstock off and stored on your kit, mag out, bayonet off, and the gun strapped across your chest, so it's not sticking out either side, it's not going to snag, or whether you're conventional infantry and you're going in on a glider and piling out of that, you are very likely to benefit from a nice compact weapon like the Sten. And this is the best of the Stens, quite frankly. Now, of course, whoever else is using Mark V Stens on D-Day, the Paras, it's hard to understate the importance of that unit. You know, the phrase "tip of the spear" is a bit cliched, but they really were. You know, these are the best you've got available to put, well, up to and including behind enemy lines, and they've got to have automatic firepower on them. You know, they're dropping with other weapons, they're going to retrieve those weapons from wherever they land, but this means they have on them, actually, despite all complaints, a very good, decently reliable, decently accurate, close quarters weapon. And so that was actually a great combination. Okay, next up in our weapons of D-Day, we have the M1A1, this bit here, really, well, there, carbine. So, very briefly, the M1 carbine introduced as what's later known as a personal defence weapon. So a weapon for officers and for troops who are not expected necessarily to be doing a great deal of frontline fighting. Very capable if they need it, if they're artillery or machine gunners or something, they're being overrun. An officer who can get amongst it with his men if he needs to, with something that's a halfway house between a pistol, famous 1911 A1 pistol, and the M1 Garand, or the 1903 Springfield in some cases, full power rifles. So those are heavy, long, cumbersome, but powerful and accurate. To what the infantrymen need, the riflemen need. If you're not frontline infantry, something super short, light and handy was ideal, and so the M1 was born. And 6 million of those things were made, one of the most prolific weapons of the Second World War. Much more common than the Thompson that we know and love from all the pop culture. So it was realised in 43 that if the Allies were going back in, taking the fight to the Nazis, a version of the paratroopers was going to be needed. And so what do? Well, a conventional rifle or shotgun style wrist and wooden buttstock, you chop that off. They didn't literally convert, as far as I know. They were made new, but the design is a conversion. Lop that off, graft on a wooden pistol grip, so that you've still got something to hold on to, and arguably for close quarter battle that this thing is primarily for, you get a bit more control as well. And then your wooden buttstock is replaced by a simple steel wire, a metal plate on this side holding a little cleaning oil bottle there as well. This one's intact, which is really nice. And on this side, it's not really replicating the nice comfortable wooden stock, but a leather facing so that your face doesn't freeze to it in extreme cold weather or whatever. And a pivoting butt plate. We'll see why that is in a moment. It's against a spring. Cast metal butt plate there. And it joins at the top and at the bottom. Oh, there's also a sling loop on the bottom because you've lost your ability to mount the sling to the wooden buttstock. Everything forward of that is the same as the M1 Carbine. Lots of good information on the M1 out there for you to dive into if you want to. We're focused on the Paratroop rifle or carbine. I should mention the caliber though. So that's 30 carbine, which is designed for this weapon. And it's essentially a Magnum pistol cartridge. 0.3 of an inch, so relatively small bore compared to a Thompson anyway, travelling at a fair old rate of knots, but not a full power rifle cartridge by any stretch of the imagination. But very, very controllable for rapid fire. Unlike the Mark V Sten, it's not a submachine gun. The M2 would be automatic, but the M1 and the M1A1, they are semi-automatic only. So it's rapid aimed shots with this thing. So to finish up on the butt, this is maybe not ideal. Most folding stocks have a latch to unlatch it. This is just overcoming resistance. There's actually a spring plunger installed in this area, and I don't know if you can see it, but it relies on distorting the steel wire till it pops, till it bends down and pops two little lugs out of notches in the bottom of the grip, enough that it can then fold. And that's where a folding butt plate comes in, where it just kind of gets pushed out the way by the wooden stock. It doesn't lock shut like most modern folding stocks do. It just kind of sits there, and you can see there's a groove forming in the in the forestock there, where this thing doesn't really fold out the way as it should. And it just kind of sits there. But as a paratrooper, with this squished against your kit, strapped, lashed to your chest, the thing stays short enough that it won't snag on stuff on the way out. And then you land, you pick up the rifle, and if you're in a true emergency, you can sort of grab it here and blat off some shots from the hip, reaction shooting, or point shooting. But in all reasonable scenarios, you grasp the butt, unfold it, you bring it into the shoulder, and you shoot it properly. So a real kludge in a way. I think it was only a few months available to actually convert the design into a paratrooper rifle with the folding buttstock. So it wasn't ever going to be perfect, but it was what was needed on D-Day when American paratroopers, limited alternatives at that point. You know, the Thompson has already been redesigned without a removable buttstock, and it weighs a massive amount. So the M1 was a great choice, but if you jumped with a conventional M1, A, it might snag, B, you're probably going to snap it in half. In a collection I worked with previously, we actually had one that someone had jumped out of a perfectly serviceable aircraft, landed on it, snapped it in half, and he'd done a field repair with some iron straps. So M1A1 was the way to go. All right, one more bit of paratrooper equipment. It's not actually a weapon, but it has been confused with a weapon in a movie. I don't normally talk about things that are not guns or gun related, but this little device here in this nice little box, this is a modern production example of this item, is actually firearms adjacent thanks to a well-known movie, which we'll come to in a moment. Now, weirdly, I ran into one of these for the first time that I remember in person on holiday at an air museum, and they had a Dakota aircraft with actual D-Day. It was an airworthy, it's a D-Day provenanced aircraft. It flew on D-Day. I know the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, friends of ours as well. Their aircraft also is associated with D-Day, both painted with D-Day stripes. Anyway, one of these was hanging off the ladder, and the rather excellent guide there, this is at the Valiant Air Command Warbird Museum in Florida, near Cape Canaveral, and the very excellent guide there, John Piawati, who's a Vietnam veteran strike pilot, involved in all sorts of things, amazing chap. He showed us the aircraft, and he showed me the clicker, and this is kind of passed me by. I don't think I'd come across it. Very, very loud, I don't know if you can tell over the microphones, but so this started life as some sort of child's toy, and it was co-opted for D-Day as a sort of challenge and response code system between paratroopers, so US airborne, 82nd Airborne for sure, 101st I think, possibly others, all had one of these, or as many as they could issue had them, and you would give one click as a challenge if you heard someone in the undergrowth or something, and the correct response back was, and then you knew that that was a friend, not a foe, because these guys are sometimes dispersed over miles, because depending on the speed of the aircraft when they're released in their parachutes. The other way to do it, of course, was to shout or whisper or whatever code words, depending on the situation. But this was a primary means of doing that on D-Day. Now, why is he talking about this? This guy does guns. Well, there's a scene in The Longest Day, released in 1962. Some of you are already remembering this, I'm sure. And the paratrooper gives his challenge click, and he receives a rather suspicious sounding Foley created click, double click back. But it's really rather obviously some sort of weapon bolt being operated, combined with the sound of the same thing they used to make the Foley for the clicker, which was probably the clicker itself. And so he, because he's in the movie and not the audience, he doesn't realise this, and very sadly the character gets slightly unconvincingly shot in that scene.
Two clicks. 2 clicks.
And what's happened is the German soldier that's heard the challenge click has answered with 2 operations of his Kar 98K bolt, which makes no sense at all. Maybe if he had lifted the bolt and then slapped it down to sort of make a click, but it would still sound different to this. No bolt action rifle sounds like that. So it's indicative of the confusion that must have existed on the day, especially at night. But it's kind of a nonsense Hollywood scene, to be honest with you. But it does tie this thing to a rifle, which means I can talk to you about it. Thanks so much for watching this episode, everyone. As ever, please do check out our website, our brick and mortar museums here in the UK. Definitely check out our partners, History of Weapons and War. So you can watch our content there without advertisements, which is nice. It's all the same content from us. And a number of partners friends really, people we've been working with for years in various different ways, who cover well, weapons and war in very interesting ways. So please do see if that's something you would like to sign up for. There's also our Royal Armouries membership programme, which gives you various benefits, including sort of behind the scenes access of different types. So again, check out the website for more information on that. That is the end of part 1. We have a whole second part to come on the weapons of D-Day, and I hope you'll join us for that next week.
Here at Fort Nelson, on top of Portsdown Hill, our exhibition D-Day, A Portsmouth Story, brings to life memories and stories of what happened during that time.
There's 10 silhouettes scattered all over the fort. They all represent a different individual who was an eyewitness or connected to D-Day and the Second World War.
I feel privileged that Fort Nelson here have decided to use my father as part of this exhibition.
It's vitally important to mark D-Day because of the significance it had in World War II and just the sheer size of the operation.
And it's something that should never ever be forgotten.
We really look forward to welcoming you here at Fort Nelson.